D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you. Derek, David, and I are in Nashville. Willie Donick is in Boston with the Nashville Predators. 0 for 2 on their back-to-back weekend in New York, but the Predators are back in action tomorrow against the Boston Bruins, a 6 o'clock puck drop, local puck drop that is here, 6 o'clock puck drop. Predators and Bruins, we will get into the Predators later in the show. The sell-off has begun for the Nashville Predators. Gus Nyquist out the door. We'll discuss that in a little bit. Plenty to get into, of course, around the NFL now that the NFL Combine is over. We also are going to talk about Vanderbilt, which we will do right off the hop. But before we do that, Derek, you walked in, and the first thing you said to me is that you have, I would say, a petty grievance.
Yes,
that you would like to get off your chest. So I turn it over to you to vent, my friend.
Yes, I mean, and it's Monday too, which I love Mondays. Some people just don't. I don't know why, but I love Mondays. But so typically, I only hear this phrase when I'm at restaurants, or may frequent a bar every now and then. You go up to the waiter, the mixologist, whoever, and you say, "Wow, man, a lot of drinks. What would you suggest?" Which, because there are plenty, different types of vodkas and, bourbons and all this other stuff. So it's like, what would you suggest? Or you sit down at the table and you're with, maybe just another person or a group, a small group, and you're looking at the menu and you're deciding between that and that. What would you suggest? Typically, that's what happens. And I think everybody pretty much is okay with that in under those circumstances in that setting. You don't use that phrase ever when you're at a coffee shop. Mainly one called starts with the S but ends with Bucks, okay? You don't do that at a coffee place. You don't walk up to the counter and say, "Hey, what would you suggest?" You don't do that.
No.
No, it's a coffee shop. I understand.
People have things to do.
Exactly.
A lot of people.
Absolutely. It's morning time. This ain't a sit down leisurely and order and look at the menu. No, this is not one of these establishments.
Can I piggyback off of you?
Okay, go ahead.
I will tell you what one of my biggest pet peeves is at a restaurant where you order at a counter. So it's not you could sit down at the restaurant, but there's no wait service.
Yes.
So you go up to the counter and you order. If you are in line, you better know what you're ordering when you get up there. So let's say I am fifth in line when I walk in at a sandwich shop. I'm going to use that time in line to look at the menu and figure out what I want. So when I go up there, I can say, "Hi, may I please have blank?" The worst is when someone's in line, they're not paying attention, they're on their phone, and then as soon as they get up there, after you've been waiting for several minutes, they're like, See, if I owned a shop like that where you ordered at the counter, there would be a shot clock on the counter. You have
great idea.
You have 30. Exactly. You have 30 seconds. If you do not get your
order, the NBA, just go 24.
Yes, or 24.
Unless you have kids. Now, if you have kids, it's a different story. Yeah. But if you're just with you and maybe your mate or other grown-ups, then yes, you got a 24 shot.
I think in a lot of places after about 10, if you go 10 seconds, and you have not started your order, you're going to get some bad looks. Yeah. You're going to get some side eyes.
Oh,
definitely. I want to say it's one of the famous cheesesteak establishments in Philadelphia. They have a sign on their window that's basically like, "Know what you want when you get up here, or you're going to the back of the line."
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
That's basically what I would do. So the waiting in line, it's like if you're going to be standing there for 5-10 minutes, if you're at a popular establishment, and you get up there and I'm right behind you and you're just looking at the menu for the first time, no.
Go to or at least let me get in front of you so I know what I want to order.
Right.
But people, when you go to a coffee establishment, whatever coffee establishment that is, you get up to the counter. Don't ask the cashier,
the barista,
or the barista. There we go. What would you suggest? If I'm the barista, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, well, I'm a chart in my mind. I'm thinking, because Joe was right. I presented this to Big Joe as he was leaving. And Joe was right. I would say, that $15 drink up there, I'm going to sell you that one. I would suggest the mocha latte, coffee, half and half, a sprinkle of sugar and soy sauce. And
soy sauce.
I don't know, whatever. I sell that to you for $15 or $20
with a caramel drizzle too.
Yeah, with some yes. To end it with some caramel drizzle, shaken,
you know what I would
not
do?
Stirred. Okay.
I would take a different approach, teammates. If I were the barista,
yes.
Unless I'm like part owner of the store, and a $15 drink that takes a while to prepare is going to make me some extra money, I would just say, you know what I would suggest? Just a straight up black coffee. Here you go. Next.
Absolutely. The easiest thing on the menu.
Yeah.
Or a tea.
Yes, I'm feeling real plain today. I'm feeling black coffee, nothing in it. Here you go. Next up.
All right. What would you suggest? A cup of water.
Some milk.
And there we go. It's as simple as that. So again, people, when you get up to the counter, one, I'm like Adam, you should already know what you're ordering. And then two, once you get up to that counter, do not ask the barista, because he or she has a job to do as well.
It's the last thing they want to hear you say.
And if you sit back there for 5 minutes, they're going to be nice to you. And they're going to suggest some things. But in their mind, they're thinking, just order a damn coffee. It's early in the morning. Okay? Get a coffee or get your half and half latte skinny dip. Okay?
I'll tell you, here in New England, I have seen this firsthand. You might get hurt. They have these seafood places sometimes, and there's long lines. People will wait for a long time because of it's a clam shack, or it's, they got great seafood, and they got a lot of different things. They got everything you want. You want shrimp, you want scallops, you want clam chowder. You got all of that stuff. But man, if you are not ready for your order when you walk up there, people will squawk like you would not believe. And it's just like you said, they have the sign up there. But man, you want to talk? Can I say mass holes on the air? I already did one time, didn't I?
Yes,
go right ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you will get the full effect if you walk up and you go, what do I like today? Do I want clams today? Do I want some soup? What's your catch of the day? No.
The catch of the day is you could be catching that, what, whooping.
Someone who looks strangely like Hal Gill will just beat you up if you don't have your order. I'm sure Hal loves that sort of stuff.
You're gonna catch a mash whooping, okay?
Do you feel better, Derek?
I feel great.
Okay, great. So let's keep the good vibes rolling here. Vanderbilt, a 97-93 overtime win against number 14 Missouri on Saturday, erase a 9-point halftime deficit. Tyler Nickel with a 3-pointer as regulation is expiring to force overtime. The Commodores prevail against the Tigers 97-93 in overtime. That's 3 consecutive wins for Vanderbilt, all against ranked opponents. They beat number 24 Ole Miss, number 12 Texas A&M on the road, and number 14 Missouri. Gentlemen, we talked about this late last week after Vanderbilt defeated Texas A&M on the road. And I said, that's all I need to see. They got the one thing that their resume was missing, a marquee road win in the SEC. They got it against Texas A&M. To me, the win against Missouri is the cherry on the top. If I had a big old master lock right now, I'd slam it on the table. There's no more need to look at Bubble Watch if you are a Vanderbilt basketball fan. And there might be part of Coach Willie that's cringing right now. They're in. I'm sorry. They're in. There is no suspense. Vanderbilt punched its ticket to the NCAA tournament by winning on Saturday.
Yeah, I think we could say that they're in. I looked at one today and I sent it to you guys. They had them at 90%. It just goes to show you that crazy things can happen. But yes, they have a lock NCAA tournament resume now with those 3 wins last week. And really now, if I'm Coach Byington, I'm thinking don't let your guard down. Keep the intensity, keep pushing. Don't let off the gas here, because they've got two teams that they're playing this week that are desperate to try to get in, and you're going to get everything that Arkansas has tomorrow night with a quick turnaround, and you've got a Georgia team that absolutely needs to win on Saturday. So you want to keep going in the right direction. But what a job by Mark Byington and this group. That was an incredible game to watch. There were so many great college basketball games over the weekend. I'm so much enjoying the college product, and I was really down on it. I'm always going to love college basketball. I was a college basketball player. I'm always going to watch, but I just thought the product for a good while was not great. Not now. Just flip on a game. It's exciting. It's a good product. That Vanderbilt comeback against Missouri. You know how I don't like sometimes when you tell me, hey, the probability, and Adam, you love these numbers. Hey, your odds of making the playoffs or your odds of winning this game are the probability is only 10% or 15%. I'm like Han Solo. Never tell me the odds, because they can always change, right? But Missouri had a 95% win probability when they were up by, 5 with less than a minute to go, 26 seconds or something like that. And Vanderbilt managed to get it to overtime and pull it out. What a great Memorial Magic kind of performance.
So you mentioned the two remaining opponents for Vanderbilt in the regular season. They host Arkansas, and they're at Georgia. According to Bubble Watch, Arkansas is at 33%. Georgia is at 60%. Both of those games are big, Derek, but particularly that game on the road at Georgia, who recently upset Florida. But to Willie's point, the two teams that Vanderbilt has left on its schedule are desperate. They need to win this game against Vanderbilt to boost their odds of making the tournament. So I actually do like the fact, guys, that the teams that Vanderbilt is playing at the end of the regular season are teams that need to win versus teams that are either out of it or their spots are confirmed. I like that they are ending the season with two teams that are desperate, because that, to Willie's point, raises Vanderbilt's desperation level as well.
Yeah, I think Vandy needs to keep their foot on the gas pedal, because I think they have some momentum going. And the last thing you want to do is sort of ease up, because more than likely you are in the dance. Now, the seeding will get tricky. I think they need to be a mid-level seed. So they would have, I think they have a better shot at sort of advance, either middle or a bottom seeded team, and then they end up upsetting one of the bigger seeded or higher seeded teams. But I think Vandy can go on a run if they continue to play the way they have played the last 3 games against Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Missouri. Even in their losses, check this out. Even in their losses, at half, I don't think they've been down no more than 9, maybe 10 points at half, which each team they've lost to. And in some situations, they were down 1 point, 2, or even up going in the half. This is a team that can compete with anybody in the country. They got to learn how to continue to play that physicality without getting in foul trouble, because I think a lot of times that's what hinders them in the second half, is that they get in foul trouble early and the other teams get to the bonus and they're at the free throw line more times than not. Missouri was at the free throw line, I think, at one point double the times Vandy was at the at the free throw line. Now it's sort of to even out as the game as they got into the latter part of the game, the last minute or so, when Missouri was fouling. But that's the problem with Vandy. But they got to learn how to play through it, which they played through it against Missouri. The being in foul trouble, the two big guys getting in foul trouble. That's something they can't help, Willie. And you and I have talked about this. Because of their lack of size, they got to play a different brand of basketball. They got to be more physical. And if the refs allow them to be physical throughout the game, I think Vandy has a better shot at winning in that fashion than not. But right now, they're on a roll. They're in. Now it's all about, seeding, headed into the big dance. I still think they need a win in the SEC tournament. If they can push 2 wins or even get to the championship game, that'd be great. But I think they at least need one win within their own tournament. Not based upon, they will make the dance or not. No, I think it's continued momentum. You don't want to be off too long. I don't think Vandy can't afford to be off too long.
And I think you want to try to improve your seed, as you mentioned, D Mace, like that 8 versus 9.
Yes.
That I think if you can push and maybe get to a 7, then you avoid having to play the 1 seed in the second round. Like if you're in the 8 versus 9, obviously the first game, whether you're 7, 8, 9, or 10, which is probably what they're looking at right now, the first game is going to be a pick 'em, right? It's going to be a flip of the coin. But then if you can be a 7 or even a 10, you would presumably play a 2 seed and not a 1 seed. There's a little bit of difference there. So I think you're trying to push for every little thing you can get. But let's not bury the lead here. This group, you mentioned it, D-Mace. This is an undersized team that has to scrap. Other teams know, like Missouri, that's got big guys. Missouri's got unbelievable talent. I would take, this is my hot take, Missouri's talent individually might be better than Tennessee's. From 1 through 7, they've got some incredible talents. They've got some weaknesses that Vanderbilt exploited. But teams like Missouri know that they can take it at the undersized big guys for Vanderbilt and have a lot of success. They can get them in foul trouble. You wear them down. That's probably the scouting report. But Vanderbilt, to get to this point, they were predicted 16th in the league. 16th. And it's not like they brought in 5-star recruits or some All-American who transferred from somewhere else. These were guys that nobody had heard of, including me. I'd never heard of any of these guys. Maybe if you watched Michigan State the last few years, you were aware of A.J. Hoggard. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's a pretty good player. But collectively, what these guys have done is incredible, especially when you consider how good the SEC is. The SEC is the best I've ever seen it from a depth perspective. And I've seen some great basketball in the SEC, but 1 through 12, 1 through 13, it's amazing what Vanderbilt has done. I tip my hat to what they've done over there.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Vanderbilt's overtime win against Missouri on Saturday, or Tennessee's buzzer-beating win against Alabama on Saturday. We'll talk about that a little bit.
That was unbelievable. How about that?
We will bring that up coming up next. But also coming up next, a really interesting article published today by Albert Breer looking inside the Titans evaluation process for the NFL Draft's #1 pick. Some interesting nuggets in that story, and we'll talk about those next. 615-737-1025. If you want to win tickets to a Predators game, then be listening to Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning for Preds Pick to Click. All you have to do is guess a Preds goal scorer, and if they put the puck in the back of the net, you win. Be listening tomorrow morning for the cue to call on Robbie and Rexroad. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. We talked Vanderbilt, so I don't want to ignore you Vols fans out there either. The Volunteers defeated Alabama 79-76 on Saturday, a huge game in Knoxville. Jahmai Mashack, not just the shot that he hit to win the game, which I believe he fired from the first E in Tennessee as time was expiring, but he made several big plays down the stretch of that game, drawing a foul on a missed free throw by Chaz Lanier. And here's a sidebar. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen. Chaz Lanier missed free throws at the end of the Vanderbilt game, correct?
Yeah,
correct. Yes,
he missed the last one. He missed one. He made the first, and he had a second that would have tied the game, which he missed.
Jahmai Mashack bailed him out by beating his man to the rebound, getting fouled, and hitting 2 free throws. Chaz Lanier not being able to hit free throws in crunch time, that's something I would keep an eye on if I'm a Tennessee fan, because that's twice weird. Now that I've seen that.
And he's a great shooter, and I'm looking up his free throw percentage right now. It's, in the normal situations, he's really good. He's, 78%. It's not lights out. But what's interesting, he's really a jump shooter. He doesn't get fouled very often. I think that is one thing that I don't want to call it a flaw, but it's just a style of his game. Like, for example, Zakai Ziegler, he shot 123 free throws on the year. He gets to the line, right? He's attacking the basket. Lanier is more of a catch and shoot, so he doesn't get fouled as often. He makes most of the free throws, but I think that's maybe where at the end of a game, if you haven't shot a lot of free throws and you're going to the line for just the first or second time of the game, that makes you more susceptible to miss a big one here.
Well, listen, it's happened twice. So these are little tendencies that teams pick up on. It may not come into, effect during, the first half or the first 10, 12 minutes of the second half. But I think as you start to get later in the game and the games are close, or if you're trying to come back, if a team's trying to come back, then based upon the scouting report, he's going to be one of those guys they look to foul. Not because he's not a good foul shooter, but because the last 2 situations he was put in, crucial, moments where you need to have ice water in your vein, he's come up short. Like you said, Willie, he's a really good shooter. But now that you've missed 2 in a situation like that, and I'm sure he's made some in those situations too, but you're going to be looked at as the guy more likely they can foul when there are other guys on the floor that can shoot free throws. Even though you are an 80% free throw shooter, I would rather foul you when it's 5 seconds left in the game and we're down 2 points.
I'm sure there's a clutch free throw statistic out there, and I have not watched every single Tennessee basketball game, so there might be examples of him hitting clutch free throws. When I saw him miss that free throw against Alabama, my mind immediately went to the missed free throw against Vanderbilt. And if not for Jahmai Mashack getting into the lane, getting fouled, if Alabama grabs that rebound, the game is over probably. For Tennessee.
The probability that we talked about how Alabama and Missouri are kicking themselves right now because they had the game. I don't want to say they had it won, but they had the game in their hands on the road in tough environments, right? And they didn't execute great, right? So Alabama is up by, I'm trying to look at they were up by 4 with 36 seconds left. Right there, you've got to if you execute, like, because they have to foul. If you make your free throws, if you don't turn the ball over, it's going to take a lot for you to get beat. But that's kind of what happened, right?
Yeah.
Like, what happened on the miss? I missed this one. What happened on the Lanier missed the free throw, and Tennessee ended up getting the ball back?
Mashack. So Mashack went for the rebound and just blew past his guy on the block after the ball went up. And Alabama's player fouled Mashack as Mashack was going for the rebound. So Mashack went to the free throw line, hit 2 free throws to tie the game. And then he made a play on the other end of the floor to tie up a ball, if I recall correctly, leading to...
Right, it got them the ball back.
How often do you see out of bound 5-second calls anymore.
Not
right. Especially with Alabama having timeouts, I believe.
Right. That's where Alabama is kicking themselves. That's where they've got to learn and say, okay, when we get into the NCAA tournament, that cannot happen.
Yeah.
Right. You can't give up a rebound on a missed free throw, and you can't have a 5-second. That game, you cannot end up losing in regulation when you have the ball with 3 seconds in a tie game, right? And they give up a 5-second, and Mashack ends up, making a miraculous shot.
Yeah, you can't. You can't give up situations like that, or put your team in situations like that, where you're not doing the little things at the end of the game, to secure victories. Now, they were able to, win the game on a hell of a shot by Mashack. But, I mean, should they have been in that position? I mean, and when you are in that position, you have to make sure that you do the things necessary to close out games. So, I like you, Willie. I love this conference more than I've ever loved it. Why? Because I was watching it the other day, and I forgot who was calling the game, or they were in between halves, and one of the commentators said this may be the best conference he's seen ever. Like, for this 1 year, from top to bottom, this is the best conference ever.
And that's a heck of a debate. Yeah, I think you'd have some people from the ACC in the heyday.
Exactly.
When the best players stayed for 3 years. Like, I'm talking about the most talented players on the planet playing 3 or 4 years of college basketball. That you'd have a pretty good argument there, but I think your point is still valid, and how fun the games are, and you just don't know. Every Wednesday and Saturday, whenever there's 2 or 3 games on, you're going to find one that's just outstanding to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's another great game in the SEC on Wednesday. Number 3 Florida at number 6 Alabama. That is a huge game on Wednesday. But Joe Lunardi.
Let's talk about one more. Let's talk about one more situation too, because this is what we're going to see that might separate teams who are talented enough to make a run to the Final Four and teams that might get upset by somebody in the first or the second round. All right, because we just talked about the situational foul ups that Alabama made to allow Tennessee a little bit of crack to bust through and pull out the win. Because that's what it comes down to, right? This is what we love about March Madness. Like, we eat it up, those late game situations. And teams practice these every day. At least the good ones do. And this is what Alabama's got to work on. Missouri, up by 3. Less than 10 seconds to go. Shooting free throws. They made all of their free throws at the end. They didn't choke at the free throw line. They made 4 for 4. But how can they let Tyler Nickel shoot that shot up by 3? If you watch the tape, he's being guarded by Trent Pierce, 6'10". Trent Pierce is inside the 3-point line. He's got his eye on the best 3-point shooter that Vanderbilt has, right, in Nickel. And what does Pierce do? As A.J. Hoggard, and A.J. Hoggard made a really smart play. He goes into the lane. He knows they have to have a 3. He could have gone in and got a dead layup, and Missouri probably should have let him go. But Pierce takes one step in, turns his head, and that's all that they needed to kick it out. And Nichols got that quick release, and he ties the game. Trent Pierce should have been plastered to Tyler Nickel. Who cares if A.J. Hoggard goes in and lays the ball in? You're still up by 1 with probably 2 or 3 seconds to go. Or they could have done the classic debate, right, of do you foul? You could have fouled Hoggard as he's coming up the court, let him shoot 2, and you don't give up a 3. But if you're not going to foul, you better not leave the best 3-point shooter that they have. So that is a huge brain cramp by Missouri, who is talented enough to beat anybody, but their shot selection and their lack of attention to detail is what leaves them open to get upset. So this is just what I love about college basketball.
Joe Lunardi, in his update on Sunday morning, he tweets these out. After the Tennessee win against Alabama, has Tennessee as the 4th-ranked number 1 seed. So Tennessee moves up to the 1 line, Alabama down to the 2 line, the 5th overall ranked team, Florida right behind at 6th overall, Florida and Alabama on Wednesday. So a lot going on in the SEC as per usual. 615-737-1025. Okay, coming up next, we will get into this deep dive from Albert Breer on the Titans evaluation process for the NFL Draft's number 1 pick. 615-737-1025. Before we get there, however, this week's Nashville's Best Deal is from Brewster's Real Ice Cream in Hendersonville. Brewster's offers handcrafted cakes, pies, and ice cream flavors of peppermint, Oreo, eggnog, and gingerbread man. Is this from the holidays? Either way, enjoy the magic of homemade happiness this season. You could still eat pie and ice cream and peppermint Oreo and eggnog in March, I guess. Visit thegamenashville.com/deals now and get half off a $50 gift card while supplies last.
Happy Monday, everyone. This is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you have set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to come up short. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. This morning, Albert Breer, NFL reporter for Sports Illustrated, dropped a really interesting story titled "Inside the Titans Evaluation Process for the NFL Draft's #1 pick." I recommend it. Titans fans out there, you can find it at si.com. Lots of newsworthy nuggets in here, gentlemen. I think first and foremost, Breer and others have reported this since. 3 of the 4 top prospects in this draft, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter, will be in Nashville over the next week for their 30 visits. Cam Ward will be at the facility this Friday, according to Albert Breer. Shedeur Sanders will get to town next Sunday night with his visit a week from today, next Monday. Abdul Carter will visit Thursday, and Hunter is slated to come to town in a couple of weeks. Breer notes Hunter's is later for scheduling reasons and because his pro day isn't until early April. So there's some news right off the hop. And we'll get into certain aspects of this story because, again, it's really well reported. But there was a quote.
Albert Breer is very good.
Yes, there was a quote from,
I think he's really good,
from Mike Borgonzi in this story. So the first time I read it, this quote really popped out to me. This was about Borgonzi and the type of player he's looking for with the #1 pick. He said, quote, "This pick, when we're picking this high, this guy should drive the culture," Borgonzi said. "It's like, this is the type of guy we're looking for. When you make a pick this high, you don't want to just get enamored by the talent you see on film. That's part of the process. The other part is making sure that that person fits the culture, and he's going to drive the culture too. That's an important part of it," end quote. So according to Mike Borgonzi, the #1 pick in the draft should drive the culture. And look, Derek, you and I had some spirited conversations last week about Shedeur Sanders. I know that there are people listening to this right now who listened to me read that quote and are immediately thinking, well, there goes Shedeur Sanders, because I don't know if he can drive the culture. And we talked a lot about this last week. But I did find that quote to be very interesting, Willie. This guy should drive the culture. When you make a pick this high, you don't want to just get enamored by the talent you see on film. That's part of the process. The other part is making sure that that person fits the culture, and he's going to drive the culture too. That's an important part of it.
I love that approach, and I agree with it 100%. When you pick first, you want everything. You want everything that you can get in a player. The problem is you can only pick from the players that are available to you in that particular year. And so that is the question. Is that guy in this mix in the eyes of Mike Borgonzi? Because you hope not to be in this position ever again, right? But here's where they are. But I love the idea. And that is what you should be searching for. And I think regardless of what position the guy plays. But ideally, it's a premium position to go with. Premium makeup, leadership, driving the culture, all those things he said.
I think if you're drafting a high, or if you're drafting in the first round, I believe you're picking or you're drafting guys that are going to uphold your culture, whatever that culture are going to expand your culture, and then ultimately be one of the guys that lead your culture. That's in the first round. And I think beyond that, it's like, okay, it's just like everything else. Everybody has a specific job they got to do. So some guys are meant to lead the culture. Some guys are meant to just work within the culture. But again, when you're drafting in the first round, I think that needs to be, one of the prerequisites for getting drafted, because you would look at how special the first round is, regardless of who's drafted. But what teams are saying is, out of the 300-400 guys that are draft eligible, it's probably more than that, we are choosing to draft you one of the first 32. We are choosing to draft you. So because we are choosing to draft you, you should be one of those guys. And Borgonzi and Brinkert are right. But what is Tennessee's culture? They hadn't said it yet. I don't know what their culture is. They want to get far away from what has been going on the last couple of years, and rightfully so. I would too. But what is your culture? What culture are you establishing?
They haven't had an opportunity to do that because there's been so much upheaval in the organization. They haven't been able to plant those roots of that culture. There was another interesting nugget at the end of this article about Borgonzi and Brian Callahan and culture that I can read. But my response to that is, hopefully Mike Borgonzi is the person who can establish that culture and that it can stick. Because just because there's been so much movement in this organization, there's been no time to build a culture.
See, okay, when you're draft, because a quarterback, if you choose to draft a quarterback leads the culture or advances the culture in different ways. So what are you looking for within that advancement of the culture? Are you looking for a guy to be more vocal? Well, from my experience, we didn't need that. McNine wasn't as vocal as Eddie George was. Joe Flacco wasn't as vocal as a Ray Lewis was. But they led and they furthered the culture by their actions, the things they did in the weight room.
Different ways to drive
exactly,
the culture,
absolutely.
Right?
So how do you want the culture to be driven? Do you want a rah-rah guy? There's nothing wrong with that, but he also got to be able to, do what he needs to do on the field. Or do you want a guy that is calm and cool, that is a Peyton Manning type of guy? I'm leading by example, and when I need to say something, I will. So which one of these guys are you looking for to advance? And neither one of them is wrong, but I'm just saying, when you're drafting that high, you need to identify specifics, because your team where they sit isn't a good team. So do I want a rah-rah guy? Is it that guy that I'm looking for? Is it a guy that can just lead by example?
I think you saw during the combine the differences in the personalities of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Derek, you and I talked on Friday about Shedeur Sanders' confidence.
Yes.
And how he said, to paraphrase, if you don't think I can change the culture of your organization, don't draft me. And he pointed to his time at Jackson State, his time at Colorado, how he helped turn those programs around with his father, and used that as proof. Hey, I can do it for you too. Cam Ward, much more focused on team, I feel like. And I try not to get into this. Well, this guy was saying we, and this guy was saying I. I try not to get too much into that. But I think with Shedeur Sanders, as we discussed last week, it's going to be difficult to avoid that just because of his personality, the personality of his father. And Albert Breer even said in a separate article about his thoughts on the combine. He said, it seems pretty clear to me that Ward is the top quarterback in the draft class. I know a lot of folks are grouping him in Colorado's Shedeur Sanders. And to be clear, saying there's a separation is not giving you any definitive word on who will be a better pro or even a better rookie. It just seemed, talking to teams all week, that there is acknowledgement that in this year's draft class, it's Ward and then everyone else.
Well, I mean, it could be that way as of now. But we know once draft day comes, there are a lot of monkey wrenches thrown in the mix. And a lot of people start ooh and ah, and I didn't see that coming. Why? Because, what we've all talked about doesn't make it concrete. What makes it concrete is the day they draft. And draft after draft, we see it's like, oh, man, I didn't see them taking that guy. Or I didn't see them doing that. Again, to me, when you talk about leadership and you talk about advancing, and the personalities seem to be different from the two quarterbacks, and that's okay, because every quarterback doesn't need to be the same. But ask yourself this: Did Shedeur Sanders, in the way he chose to, because he bought into the culture. He bought it. It ain't like he was doing his own thing and everybody else was doing something else. He bought into the culture. He was the culture within that locker room. I don't think the way he presented himself and the way he went out there hurt the locker room. He was always when we were putting down his offensive line, I don't think he was doing that. When he was getting knocked down every game, he wasn't complaining. At least I didn't see it. Now, was he probably frustrated? Yeah, he probably was frustrated. I would have been frustrated too. But he kept getting back up, and he kept being that consummate, I can say pro because that's what college is, that pro. He kept getting up, getting underneath center, and going about his business. You know, he didn't go on the sideline, throwing his helmet, doing all this crazy stuff after every series. He led by example. Okay, let's just get it together, guys. I'm not sure what else people are looking for in regards to Shedeur Sanders. If you don't like him because of dad, just say you don't like him because of dad. That point blank. And I can sit better than that than to sort of fabricate some of this stuff or try to turn the narrative on Shedeur Sanders. There was a culture set at Jackson State. He bought into it. He was a part of it. He spearheaded it. What happened with Jackson State? That program got turned around. Went to Colorado, spearheaded that culture. Whatever culture they had, all of them had it. And he helped turn that program into a respectable program. So what part of Shedeur Sanders says he can't lead? That's what if you just honestly look at it, strip the name Shedeur Sanders off and just put him there. What would that look like based upon the circumstances he was under? I think it would look like a damn good leader, a guy that just went out there and did what he was supposed to do and didn't complain. But because his name is Shedeur Sanders, now you got he shouldn't do this. He shouldn't listen to this music. He shouldn't wear these chains. This is who they are. Meaning college students, right? Amateur pros or whatever you want to call them, pros. This is boy and girl, men and women. This is who they are.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the Titans? They have their 30 visits scheduled with the top prospects. They will be in town starting this week. We will continue to look into Albert Breer's story here on SportsIllustrated.com. Some other interesting notes. We'll get to those next. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063 The Game. D-Mace, Finn, Ginendonic, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, will join us to start the 1 o'clock hour. Teron was at the NFL Combine all last week. I'm sure he's got a lot of juicy tidbits for us. I believe Caroline Fenton used to call it tea.
Yeah.
I'm sure Teron Davenport has plenty of tea to spill, and we will discuss that with him and more.
I want some coffee.
Well, no, you don't, because you got mad earlier
about
I'm talking about
some coffee. That's the real.
Oh, you want something strong?
Yeah, I want something strong.
What do you recommend?
I don't know, some gossip or something from the NFL, something strong.
Somebody actually texted in during Derek's diatribe, I guess you could say, early in the program, something else that I've never experienced. I've never worked in the service industry. I have a ton of respect for people who are able to do that. I certainly don't think I have the bandwidth to do that. The worst is someone said, how is it as bad as when you go to a restaurant right before it closes? To me, that's
the worst.
Like it's a nice restaurant. It closes at 9. It's 8:42. You're like, oh, they're still open. They're trying to clean up the kitchen, and you order the most complicated thing on the menu.
I'm triggered again, man. That was the worst.
Did you work in the service industry?
I did.
What did you do?
So I helped out with the host, and then I helped out with the back a lot.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
When I saw someone come in at like 10 o'clock, I'm like, oh, dude, come on.
You know who would never do that? Willie Donick.
Yes,
Willie Donick.
Exactly.
Don't get me started about my smoothie experience. Remember that one?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know this one, so we'll have to catch up on it during the break. But we are talking about Albert Breer's story in SportsIllustrated.com, inside the Titans' reworked regime's path to April 24th, which of course is the NFL draft. So as we mentioned, the Titans have their 30 visits with the top prospects lined up. Abdul Carter will be here on Thursday. Cam Ward will be here on Friday. Shedeur Sanders will be here a week from today. Travis Hunter will visit in the coming weeks. But I noticed this in a retweet from Breer of his own story. He said, this is aggressively early for 30 visits. That was his word, aggressively early, or words, I should say. And here is what Breer writes about in regards to that. Quote, teams have called about trading up to the number 1 pick, of course. The answer they've gotten is simply that Tennessee is not quite ready yet to really consider a trade. I want to get through the entire process before we make a decision on that, Borgonzi says. And so just as having enough information to be informed before free agency is important, having a full scope of each of the 4 aforementioned guys before deciding whether to trade the pick is paramount. Borgonzi is then quoted as saying, I think that's why we've set up all these 30 visits and pro days that we're going to private workouts, because it's such a monumental decision. We want to go through an entire process before we make a decision in terms of, are we going to stay there or are we going to move back? I want to make sure we go through X, Y, and Z, go through an entire process, hit every possible touch point we can with this. And a lot of the time you're digging, you have all the information from the scouts. You start to call around not only to coaches, but to support staff with the college programs. You want to see what the real makeup of this player is. You want to do that with every pick, but certainly with this pick, you want to make sure you're bringing the right person into the building. So it appears, Willie, that the Titans are working fast to make sure they have a good sense of these 4 players, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter, so that if they do have to move off the pick, they're prepared to do so.
Well, the more I delve into this article, it's a really good piece by Breer. I enjoy hearing them talk about the process, the infrastructure, because we have talked so much, almost till we're blue in the face, about the upheaval in the Titans front office and how it doesn't seem like everybody's on the same page. And for all the words and goals they set out, they haven't really been able to appear like they're a well-oiled machine. But it does look like, for all the speculation that people have had of, Brinker doesn't really want Callahan to be the coach, or, how did Brinker get in charge? And does Brinker know what? it does look like, based on this article, you guys tell me if you have a different impression, that they look like they have set up a really good routine where people know their roles. You know, with people, for example, like Reggie McKenzie coming in as assistant GM, what his role is. It looks to me like there's a good plan of how they're going to go about this process. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's for them, any team that's in a position that they're in, and because they need so many needs, I think you have to jump on it a little bit earlier than the rest of the league, because you had the number one pick. So you get an opportunity to evaluate your top 5 or top 10, and you have to evaluate them extensively, because you know there is a possibility that you may trade out of this pick. So you want to make sure that you have all the information before you decide on whether you're going to keep the number one pick or trade the number one pick. Again, they have a lot of holes to fill. And then you want to start setting up some of these visits before other teams do, because there's nothing in the league that says you get first dibs. At least I don't think there is, that you get first dibs on these individual players in regards to you bringing them into your facility. You don't get first dibs on them. It's how your schedule aligns, or how their schedule aligns. So you want to try to be the first one in, setting up your schedules, knowing which guys are coming in, and hopefully, you know, your visit is one of their first visits. And then from there, you can start evaluating how you're going to proceed in the draft. So I think it's a good thing. The article went in depth with,
and let me throw one thing specific at you, D-Base, and you tell me if you're seeing this. Because I think we were all wondering, okay, who does what? Who's got the final? Remember how many times were those guys asked, who's got the final say? Right? I mean, that's like, we've got to have the final say. You can't have it. It looks to me, based on this article, what I'm seeing is Callahan and Borgonzi are really, and Borgonzi in particular, is leading the charge. Now, maybe they just didn't talk to Chad Brinker, but it does appear like Brinker is allowing Borgonzi and Callahan to be the front men, for at least for this first pick, right? And Callahan looks very involved in the search of what to do here, which I think is a good sign for Callahan. It doesn't look like he's just kind of sitting over at his office going, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know where I stand. I'm out of the mix. Am I a lame duck? That doesn't look like the impression I'm getting from this article.
No, I mean, I think what's happening here, Willie, is, and you're right. You don't get that sort of hint of, oh, well, Brinkert is going to be the guy that make the decision. He's running the stuff. You don't get that by reading the article. What you get is two guys that seem to be, on the same plane. Two guys that are going to, sort of feed things off one another to try to get the best pick at that particular spot in the draft, which is the number one spot. I think where Brinkert comes in is if there's a slight disagreement on who we pick. And this is what they said, and we didn't want to believe it. And obviously, honestly, I'm buying in, but until I actually see it, then I say, okay. But I think it's exactly what they said at the beginning, that, listen, the Borgonzi and Callahan are going to work together. Borgonzi is the GM. He's going to, the decisions are going to somewhat be made by him. But if there is a slight, well, we want Cam, well, we want Shedeur. Okay. Brinker, what are you thinking? That's where Brinker, I think he wants to stay out of it for the most part, but I think he will interject if he needs to. But that doesn't mean he's not going to evaluate everything like they are. I think they are just the guys that if they work long enough together and they do the job that they say they're going to do, more than likely they will come up with a consensus of who we all want.
So in this story, speaking of Brian Callahan, and Brian Callahan was featured prominently in this story from Albert Breer. It mentions that Callahan watched every 2024 snap Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders played, a lot of their 23 tape, and even some 2022 tape of Sanders at Jackson State and Ward at Washington State, plus enough defensive tape from Penn State and Colorado to have a handle on Carter and Hunter. Breer writes, then in Indy, armed with all of that information, the 4 guys did formal interviews with Brinker, Borgonzi, Ziegler, McKenzie, Callahan, the coordinator, and the position coach in the room for it. Those, of course, are just 15 minutes long, but they were done with the idea that they'd set the stage for the players' trips to Nashville, which are coming up fast, and will test them in just about every way, and test Ward and Sanders in particular intensely. Then this quote from Brian Callahan. It's trying to figure out if they can learn, how well they can process information, and it's simulated. You're never going to give them a full install, but a day 1 install, it's a healthy amount of information. And you want to see how quickly they can learn it, because that's the name of the game at quarterback, especially with young players. How fast can you get this off the ground, and can we get you ready? And can we get you ready to go, knowing where your gaps are, because they're not 8-year vets?
You want me?
I thought that was really interesting, D. Mason. I'm sure you read that and said, "Ooh, yeah, I know what he's talking about." But so break that down. The first install, to sort of to lay the foundation. Can you handle that first install?
Yes. And people think, well, first install, oh, he's just saying it, flip it like, oh, we just don't give him the first install. And it's only like 10 plays, 10 run, 10 pass. So 20 plays. No. No, sorry, Bob. That's not a day 1 installation. That's not even a 20-minute installation, okay? Or an hour installation. When he's talking about a day 1 installation, he's talking about, because you got the run, pass, protection, all this stuff. He's talking about close to 100 plays. If indeed day 1, if indeed you're going to go like a true day 1 install, because we're day 1 install of training camp. We are in that first meeting for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we only went over like 30 plays. So just imagine a day, and that's just an hour. So we're typically in those meetings 2-3 hours during camp. So when you're talking about a day 1 installation, you're talking about over 100 plays.
All right, let me ask you this, D-Mace. In your experience, you played for, include the teams that you weren't there for very long, but without even necessarily getting into the names, did you ever see a quarterback in that first install just say, when you said to yourself, this guy doesn't have it, man, we just did it, he is struggling to absorb this material right now?
Yeah, I think you see once you see guys that are a little bit lagging behind, it shows immediately once you go on the football field. Because I can say, yeah, okay, coach, yeah, I got you. I can say all of that in the classroom, and I may have it, but there's this switch. Once you walk out of that meeting room and you're headed to that locker room to put on your gear, a lot of guys are still looking in their book, in their locker right before they go out, and then they actually go out, and you see the guys that don't quite have it. Now, listen, you don't expect everybody to have it. You just don't. But you know the guys that don't quite have it, they get this look in their eye when it's their turn to go up. Like, damn, I hope they don't give me a plate I don't know. So when you're playing that
you're hoping for the right card.
Exactly. Hopefully it's just a run play left or right. I mean, hopefully it's not one of these long, in-depth plays that I got to throw the football. Yeah, you find out who takes a little bit longer and who doesn't. Again, for me, I was always a guy that I would rather go out on the field and do it as opposed to being in a classroom. Now, I could learn in the class. I got it. But I would rather go over it. If they said we can go over it on the football field, I'm like, great, let's do it. Because I'm better as I'm doing it. If I'm in action, whatever you want me to do, if I'm doing it real time, then I'm better. As opposed to being in a classroom.
I guess my question in all of that is, after the Will Levis experience, right? Mm-hmm. Guys being able to take it from the classroom onto the field, do you think it changes their process at all? Because Callahan had an interesting comment at the combine. Maybe we can play it coming back about, I think Corey Curtis actually asked Brian Callahan this question about knowing guys who can do that. And it felt like a slight dig at Will Levis almost. So I'm wondering if is there anything that Callahan changes in his process with this after what he experienced with Will Levis?
I think it depends on if other quarterbacks had problems as well. Now, again, good offensive coordinators to great offensive coordinators, they know everybody can't be taught the same. And the quicker you identify that, the better off you will be as a team. If you're not identifying, because that's what the problem was with Will Levis. Brian Callahan couldn't identify why he could take it from the classroom to the practice field, but then once they get from the practice field to the game field, there's a disconnect. He hadn't found that out because in his past, he had guys that could take it from the classroom to the practice field to the the playing surface. He had guys that can do that. So it was like, to him, I was like, okay, every guy should be able to do that. But then when you run into a guy that doesn't, and you start to find that out, now as a court, this is where the worth kicks in. How do I now either get him to be a better quarterback or make sure that I pick up on these signs early enough with the next quarterback so we won't have the same problem? That's showing your worth as a coordinator / head coach. That's why the greats can do it. Andy Reid, guys like that, because they find a way. If you are having a little bit of trouble at certain areas, they find a way to help you out, all while making sure their team is progressing and developing as well. What was it? I think Bill Parcells said this, or was it Brian Belichick? Belichick. Don't tell me what he can't do. Show me what he can do. Okay. I know you. We just got to find a way to get you to be the best player. Because if we got to shorten down the playbook, then let's shorten down the playbook. Because if that's going to help you maximize your potential, then let's do it.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on this in-depth article from Albert Breer at sportsillustrated.com. Highly recommend it for Titans fans. We'll take your reaction. 615-737-1025. Also, an interesting trade in the NFL over the weekend. I'm curious for Derek's opinion on it. We'll get to that next. Willie Darnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game.
That part's the hardest part, to be honest. That's a good question, because there's a lot of guys that can talk it in the meeting room. They know what to say, how to say it. They can articulate their schematics. But the hardest part is can they take what's being taught and then execute it? And sometimes it's really more about taking it from the practice, from the meeting room to the game day. That's the part that really matters the most, because guys can sometimes do the meeting room to the practice field, but it's about how do you execute under pressure and under duress when it's all live. And that's the hardest part to find out. Sometimes you don't necessarily know until you know.
That was Brian Callahan last week at the NFL Combine. That was the quote that I was referencing in the previous segment.
Who do you think he might be talking about?
Will Levis.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Again,
and look, Will Levis is not alone.
No, he's not.
There's a million quarterbacks that have run up at some level of football. It might happen to some people in high school, or junior high, right? It's some in college, and some in the pros. Quite honestly, it happened to me in college. I had all the answers. I understood a very detailed system. The Dean Smith, North Carolina system that my coach Eddie Fogler put in there. But when it was time to go in there, I knew what was supposed to be done, but I couldn't always get the job done, right? And so that's why I was playing 7 minutes a game and not a star player on the team. But this is just how the process works. And so you're looking for that guy who could, and that, I think the last part of it, D-Mace, is the one that cut me, because sometimes you don't really know until you see him in the game.
No,
so they may not, they can't know. They can hope that they know when they pick this guy first, whoever he is, but they won't really know if he's the real deal until you get him out there.
Yeah, and see what has happened and why it's been such a sort of head scratcher, why some quarterbacks can get it, some can't. I think there was a 10-15 year period in college football where they did a disservice to the college quarterback. And I think you know where I'm going with this, Willie and Adam. When you're holding up cards and that sort of, you're not really, it's almost like they're giving you the answers right then and there. They're showing you it's just, you've sort of dumbed down that position in a sense. To me, you have, where a guy doesn't have to read the defense. The coach is reading everything for you and putting up these signs. So now, okay, I know what to do. No, these guys should be put in pressure-packed situations where there's no cards on the sideline. There's nobody telling them what to do. Yeah, I could talk it to your ear, but the clock shuts off. The microphone shuts off right in the middle of, I think, the clock, the 24-second clock. So it cuts off, so you no longer can communicate with the quarterback. That's where you start to see the great from the good quarterbacks separate themselves, because the great ones typically take over the huddle. They take over much of the play calling and they go. So it's hard now for, I think, coaches to figure that out. I can watch film of him in college, but the college game and the pro game are different. Okay. As much as they are the same, there's a lot of differences and nuances with both sports. So if I have a guy that can go out there and sort of process it all from the classroom to the practice field, from the practice field to the game field, all right, we got one. But if there's a breakdown, I got to figure out how do I connect this to where I can maximize the quarterback's potential, because he has a lot of potential here.
One other anecdote in this story, and I say this as a journalist, this is the type of anecdote when you are reporting a story that once you get it, you're like, oh, yes, I can't wait to put that in this story because it paints a wonderful picture, right? But then there's also part of me that read this and I had to cringe a little bit, not because of the reporting from Albert Breer, but just because of the overall corniness of the anecdote. And this goes to your point, Derek, about culture. So Albert Breer lets it be known that Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan really didn't know each other before they started working together. And Callahan had a quote about Borgonzi, quote, "The thing I liked first and foremost is that he came across like a normal person, just a guy that I'd like to be around." And then Breer goes into this anecdote following Borgonzi's second interview, which was in person. Quote, Callahan was flipping through Borgonzi's hyper-detailed GM book again and came across the organizational values page. On it were 4 C's, the letter C: character, communication, connection, and commitment. It hit Callahan then that 3 of the 4 were on the sign he had made for the Titans team room, a sign that read 3 C's: character, communication, connected team. Callahan thought, oh, that's effing fantastic. Took pictures of both and texted them to Borgonzi. And I was like, we haven't even talked for more than 2 hours, and we see the value of what makes championship football teams, Callahan says. He continues on from there. But I read that, like, as a reporter, I get that anecdote. I'm like, that's awesome. I can't wait to write that. Reading it, I'm like, oh, man, it's so corny. It's so corny.
It is. It's like, I'm sure there are other GMs and head coaches that think the same.
Let me ask you this question, Willie. How many GMs out there have a mantra that involves the words communication, connection, commitment, and character? How many?
If it's not those exact words.
It's basically the same meaning.
Or other words that start with D or K that have the same message, right? It's the same thing. We got to play hard. We got to play smart. We got to play together.
Yes.
I get that. What it reminds you of as you read it is, okay, this is good, right? All this is good. But none of the teams are dumb, right? At the top level, as much as people get lampooned when things don't go well and stuff like that, everybody to get to that level is bringing something to the table, right? Just some are better than others at executing, and sometimes you got to get a little lucky, but nobody's dumb, right? Everybody's trying to do the same thing, and it's extremely competitive. And I enjoyed, as you go a little bit more in depth, Callahan likes the fact that he's been through some tough times. He's seen really good teams, sees what that looks like, and seen really bad teams to see what it looks like. And Borgonzi's been through the same thing.
You mentioned that was where I was going to next. So after the quote that I read, that I made fun of a little bit, he said about Mike Borgonzi, you look at all the things that he's done in his tenure at Kansas City. Part of it's the success, but then all of the poop it took to get there. That was what really connected me the most. He's been through a whole bunch of poop. Everyone sees the 7 AFC championship games and the Super Bowls, but it was the other part that was fascinating. I felt a little bit of a connection because it's a similar journey I've been part of building a football team 2 different times. I've been part of building a football team 2 different times. Of course, the Bengals, different ways, and just the idea that I felt like he got it, at least from my perspective. So I just sent him that. I sent him the picture and said, it seems like we're aligned as it is.
Well, if you didn't think y'all were aligned before you saw what was in his notebook, I mean, I guess you weren't really paying attention to him, or y'all wasn't asking the questions to see if y'all were aligned. But listen, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, it may be corny. It is corny.
Oh, it's corny.
Corny. It is corny. But I think they want to make sure they reiterate the message that everybody is on the same page. We all are thinking in the same line. We all are marching sort of to the same beat, and that beat is a winning beat. We hope it to be a winning beat, then ultimately get us a championship. So even though it's corny, I think the Titans needed to do this. They needed to get a reset and a realignment. Even though the message may sound different, the message may sound the same, it's different because it's coming from different people. Even though you may find those 3 C's or those 4 C's on somebody else's board or in somebody else's notebook, it sounds different because there's different people pitching the message. And it seems from the outside that they're doing everything the way a head coach, GM, and Lord of all footballs, should sort of coexist.
One thing that was mentioned at the top of
Meaning
the story,
Brinker.
yes, the supreme ruler of football. One thing that was mentioned at the top of the story, Willie, that I also found interesting was the scene setter. The opening graphs of this story were about Brian Callahan and his experience during Joe Burrow's interview with the Cincinnati Bengals, and how everybody involved in that decision knew once he left that room, this is our guy. We know we are taking Joe Burrow at the top of the draft. And then Breer juxtaposed that with what Borgonzi went through when the Chiefs were at their lowest point in 2013. They decided to trade for Alex Smith. They drafted Eric Fisher, the offensive lineman. I think that's an interesting aspect of this as well. So Callahan's been there where they had the no doubt number one pick at the top of the draft. There is no question who is going to be the number one pick in the draft. Well, Borgonzi has had the experience that the Titans seem to be going through right now, where there's no clear cut necessarily number one pick at the top of the draft.
Yeah, and I happened to see something. You guys may have sent it to me, but looking back at the first round of 2013, now that was a draft where it was not ideal to have the first pick. It just in retrospect, right? We can all do this with every draft, and hindsight's 2020. But Borgonzi goes into detail in this article talking about how they did their homework on the quarterbacks, and they determined that those guys were not worthy of the first pick.
Like EJ, was EJ Manuel, and I can't remember who the other
Geno
one was.
Smith was in the mix too, who slipped to the second round. There was maybe one or two others that may have been picked in the first round, but they did what they needed to do, and that was trade for a quarterback that got them through until they found Patrick Mahomes. Of course, Alex Smith played really good football for them for a while, but you can only deal it makes your job easy when it's an obvious first pick like Andrew Luck or Joe Burrow. It's a lot tougher to be in the position they're in right now.
Yeah, but it still it tells me that if this is sort of the table you're setting, when you're talking about this year's draft, that there may not be, a quarterback that is worthy of the number one pick. You're already setting the table of, hey, listen, we may not draft a quarterback. We may choose to go another route, or we may choose to, move out of that pick. Kansas City got lucky. I'm gonna tell you this, because Fisher, you drafted basically a guard number one. That's what you did. He made the Pro Bowl as a guard. So you drafted really a guard at the number one with the number one pick, because he wasn't much of a tackle. He struggled.
Right.
And they moved him in. And they were lucky because Alex Smith was playing some good football. And then all of a sudden, 3-4 years later, they get Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, now, they clearly didn't hit the home run
exactly.
with the first pick. But if you look, there weren't a lot of home runs in that first round.
Yeah, no, you're right. But what I'm saying is that if indeed you do go that route, you got to make sure you do those things that are going to keep you on that path of winning, whether it be, going out and get a veteran quarterback and making sure you make the right pick. At least that first pick has to be a home run pick, I believe. Because, and I said this before, because of where this organization is, they are depleted of talent. They need to draft somebody that's going to be a day one hit. They don't need to wait for him to develop, okay, into that guy. No, he needs to show it right away. We could develop as we're going through the season, but you show right away you are a day one starter and you are our guy. If they don't find that guy, I think it's going to be, unless they sort of, make up for it in later rounds. But this draft, they need a hit. It's like one of those groups back in the day. You made a couple of, you might have been a hit maker at some other music company, but then now you're switching companies. We need a hit. We need a song that's gonna get number one on the billboards or whatever you call it. The Titans need one of those players, whether it be at 1, 3, or 6. They need that player.
615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on that. Again, a really interesting read from Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. I highly recommend it for Titans fans. 615-737-1025. There was an interesting trade in the NFL over the weekend. We'll talk about that. I would love to get Derek's thoughts on that. We'll do that next. I want to reread this. This week's Nashville's Best Deal is from Brewster's Real Ice Cream in Hendersonville. See why Brewster's is a scoop above the rest with the best ice cream, shakes, sundae splits, blasts, and more. Visit thegamenashville.com/deals now and get half off a $50 gift card while supplies last.
All right, let's talk Lee Company. We're here in Boston. Predators' next stop on the tour is against the Bruins tomorrow night. A bubble team at Nashville trying to get right and figure out a winning formula on the road. In the meantime, Lee Company back at home. They've been in business since 1944. They continue to do their thing, helping out people get their homes straight with the things that make it run. Your air conditioning system, your heating system, your plumbing system, your electric system. They do a tremendous job servicing these things and general maintenance, either at your home or even at your business, if that's what you need. Just go to leecompany.com and check it out. That's 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. You can make an online appointment right at your desk if you're sitting there and you need something taken care of back at home or even in your place of business. Easy phone call, easy process online. leecompany.com and the phone number 615-567-1000. Lee Company, proud sponsor of our Predators radio coverage tomorrow in Boston.
D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. An interesting trade over the weekend in the National Football League. The San Francisco 49ers traded Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round draft pick. Now, Deebo Samuel, over the past few years, his game has been in decline. He's dealt with some injuries. But at the height of his powers, Deebo Samuel was a yards after catch machine. And he was a big part of that 49ers offense. But he is now off to Washington. It'll be interesting to see Deebo Samuel with Jaden Daniels. I think that could be a really interesting combination. But Derek and Willie, I noticed something. I saw this in a tweet from Andrew Siciliano. Notable wide receiver trades in the last 12 months. Deebo Samuel, 5th-round pick. Mike Williams, 5th-round pick. DeAndre Hopkins, 5th-round pick. Jerry Jeudy, a 5th and 6th-round pick. Jonathan Mingo plus a 7th-round pick for a 4th-round pick. Devontae Adams for a 3rd-round pick. Stephon Diggs, a 5th and a 6th-round pick for a 2nd. Jahan Dotson in a 5th for a 3rd and 2 7ths, I believe. So a lot of notable names there, but the value of receivers, it seems like, pretty low right now.
Yeah, I think it's with veteran receivers or guys that have had trouble establishing themselves. You talked about Mingo.
Jahan Dotson would also fall into that category
as well. Into that category of guys that had high promise, but for whatever reason, haven't been able to, produce any on the football field. Then you look at Devontae Adams and some of these other guys. These are aging wide receivers, albeit some of them still may have game, but teams are looking at it as far as, okay, let's unload this contract and let's draft somebody younger. Or we're in a position now where some of these young guys that were on our roster the last couple of years are ready to play.
Well, they drafted Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, drafted Ricky Pearsall last year. And we know what Ricky Pearsall, the terrible, things that have had happened to him during the season. He still was able to come back and do what he did. So they believe in guys like him, the kid out of UT that's playing really well for them in Jennings in San Fran. They're even looking to move away from Ayuk. Why? Because Ayuk seemed to be slowing down a little bit because of the injuries, and they just gave him all this money, and he may not mesh with the locker room in a sense of what the head coach or the GM is thinking and what he's thinking. So when you see guys like that being moved for 5th-round picks, or you give me a pick, I give you another pick. I think teams are trying to get away from, because I don't think teams really want to pay wide receivers 30, 35, close to $40 million. Because they look at that as that should be for the quarterback. That's who should be making all the money, or the left tackle, or the defensive end, and then the wide receiver. Now you come on board. But now in recent years, it's been the quarterback, the wide receiver, then everybody else. So teams are looking to go younger and cheaper at that position because guys are, it's more about system, I think, with some of these guys.
And I think, Willie, that the Commanders are taking on the full freight of Deebo Samuel's contract, which is, I believe, roughly
roughly
18 million. I want to say. So 17 and a half, $18 million and a 5th-round pick for maybe 1 year of Deebo Samuel, who could be, I guess, their second wide receiver in Washington behind Terry McLaurin. I mean, it is a lot to pay, but the Commanders are in a bit of a window here. They exceeded expectations last season, so maybe it's worth the risk for them.
Right. And what else do they have going for them?
Quarterback.
They've got a really talented quarterback, and not just that, he's a quarterback that doesn't have a big price tag attached to him yet, right? When that day comes, they will not have the luxury to trade for Deebo Samuel's contract. But when you're on your first contract, you can do it. So they have the space. I think they had a ton of cap space to work with. So that's what you can do when you have a really good quarterback on that cheap price.
But I think not San Fran, but Washington, the Commanders, this may not work out well for them. Deebo Samuel is a glorified running back. That's what he is. Now, and listen, I'm not. It's no knock, but he is a glorified running back. Since he had, to me, he and Cooper Kupp sort of fall in the same category from this standpoint. The one great year they had sort of erased all of the mediocre play that they had before and after. Deebo had 2021, and I think that's when Cooper Kupp had his major year. Is either that or the year after.
I believe that was his
same
Triple
year.
Crown year.
Yeah, the 21.
Because they won a Super Bowl too.
Exactly. So when you have careers like, when you have a season like that, all of a sudden, everything you do is sort of magnified. But then when you actually look at the numbers, he's a product of his failing numbers, and his failing health is a product of his 1 year of greatness. What do you mean by that, Derek? Because he was such a dual threat, running the football, yards after catch, put him in the backfield, and catching it, that it broke down his body tremendously. Maybe that's what happened to Cooper Kupp. Broke down his body tremendously. The workload. Some guys are not used to that workload. It looks nice when you're getting hit and you're bouncing off of guys, but ask those running backs how long that can last. Deebo Samuel is a declining asset as of now. And I'm not sure that Washington is going to get what they expect.
According to ESPN, Samuel's production has declined in recent years, and after posting an absurd 1,405 receiving yards on 3.1 yards per route run, along with 365 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns in 2021, he hasn't approached those numbers. He's coming off a poor 2024, in which he recorded only 670 receiving yards on 1.8 yards per route run. It's not unreasonable to wonder if we will ever see Samuel come close to his peak again. And he's only 29.
You won't. I would be surprised. I would really be surprised if you see him get close to those numbers of 2021, because his body has broken down so much. Washington, I think Washington is one of few teams that can do this. You mentioned it, Willie. They got the ace in the hole, their quarterback. They got a young roster. They got a roster they feel could be one guy or two guys away from the actual Super Bowl, not getting to the NFC Championship game, to the actual, they've been there to get into the actual Super Bowl. Maybe Samuel's that guy and he doesn't have to put up the numbers that he did in San Fran in 2021. But if that's what they're looking for, he's a declining asset and you will not get that from him. I believe what you're more than likely going to get is an injured guy that's going to end up getting injured during the season.
I think, Willie, that the risk is minimized by everything we've said.
Yes.
You have a quarterback on a manageable contract. It is a team that's arrived sooner than most people expected. You know, I think that this is a risk a young team like the Commanders can take.
Right. Let's also look at some other examples of what we're seeing. Right. I think we've hit on a couple of them, but Amari Cooper, he gets traded to the Bills. He was, he had some moments there. He didn't hurt, but you're trying to get that one piece that's going to carry you over the top. I mean, need we say more than Julio Jones, right? And what the Titans were hoping for and what they got. DeAndre Hopkins didn't really move the needle for the Chiefs. You could argue that any other wide receiver that they were using could have done about what Hopkins would do. You just love having the veteran in there, and maybe that hope that you could find the fountain of youth for a few games. Stephon Diggs, right? He moves on from the Bills. What kind of season did he have? Just not. See what I'm saying? Like there are stories of guys who later in their career, like a Randy Moss, right, give you big numbers. Mm-hmm. But more often than not, once you reach a certain age and you're banged up, and you go to a new team, it usually doesn't work out great. So I can see why the price has dropped for some of these guys, especially if there's quite a bit of money attached to it.
615-737-1025. Any thoughts on the Deebo Samuel trade, Tennessee Titans, you name it. 615-737-1025. Teron Davenport ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, will join us next. He was at the NFL Combine all of last week. I'm sure he's got plenty of insight, plenty of tea that he can spill with us. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter Teron Davenport, who was at the NFL Combine all last week. Teron, I saw all of your updates. You were doing your job as you know how to do it, talking to people, watching people, getting a sense of everything that's been going on around the NFL. What was your biggest takeaway from the Combine as it relates to the Titans and what they could do with the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest takeaway was Cam Ward and where they have him and how, if they stay put, he's almost certainly going to be the pick.
What led you to, I mean, what led the Titans, I should say, to coming to that conclusion? What did they see from him? What did they hear from him?
Well, I think it was just a matter of confirmation. I mean, you know, his film is better than Shedeur Sanders, just as far as the upside is concerned. But then when you mix that with the way that he captivated them in the meeting, the leadership, you know, sometimes when you're sitting in there, you try to get to know somebody and you try to feel if they have it. And it seems like pretty much all of the people who met with Cam Ward feel that he has it. And that's really the thing that makes me believe that they will sit and pick at 1 unless they're knocked away by an offer.
So Cam Ward, among others, will be in Nashville this week. I believe Abdul Carter has his visit later this week as well. Shedeur Sanders early next week. Correct me if those dates are incorrect. But take us inside.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
It's Shedeur and Cam this week, and then they'll have Abdul Carter early next week. They were working on Travis Hunter. The plan was to have him in as well before Wednesday. There's some scheduling conflicts, so it might not be until the end of the month where they get Hunter in.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. So take us into what those meetings entail. When those players are here and they're at St. Thomas Sports Park, what are the Titans decision makers going to be doing with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a get to know him kind of process. They're getting him on the whiteboard. They're, you know, seeing how he could retain the information they give him, seeing the personality, body language, and just really trying to determine, okay, is this a guy that fits the culture in the building, the direction that they want to go, and is he someone that, you know, can lead the men that he's going to be put in front of?
Now, TD, obviously, you know, the Titans have many needs, and quarterback obviously is the top need, but also another position I feel may not be as you know, urgent as the quarterback. But I think you're going to have to get another playmaker, the wide receiver position. I think going into the draft, Ted McMillan was the top receiver, but after watching the combine, well, going into the combine, let's say that. After watching the combine, who do you think helped themselves? And name a guy or two in particular.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, Matthew Golden obviously up himself running that 4.29. He's going to make you go back to the film and look for that speed on the film. I don't know that it shows as much, but yeah, he definitely helped himself. I think you look at a guy like Jaden Higgins. You know, he helped himself. You know, really good vertical, broad jump. He ran solid. But I'm gonna tell you the guy that I think helped himself the most, and nobody's really talking about it, and it's crazy to me. But Dante Thornton, he ran that 4.3 at 6'5", and I tell you what, that is definitely going to open some eyes. And I think, you know, he's a guy at that size. I forget what his vertical was, but just seeing him at that size run that speed, I was like, yeah, this is something to watch.
Now, do you think because of and listen, we understand, you know, where the league has been going, at least for the last decade, and they're trying to get as fast as possible on the outside, or a guy that could be lined up in a slot that has that speed. We've seen Kansas City do it with Tyreek, and then Tyreek goes and leaves and goes to Miami, and you get the same play. We've seen it for Jamar Chase, guys like that have this tremendous speed to get downfield. Do you think what the Titans saw at the combine this year in regards to the wide receivers, do you think that changed their mind on how they proceed at that position?
No, I don't think it changed the mind. You always want height, weight, speed, right?
Mhm.
And I think, you know, those guys that bring it definitely are ones that they're going to be attracted to. I feel like it's just more of the same thing, you know, and what the league has wanted. And I think when you look at just the need to match somebody with Calvin Ridley, you know, you need that big vertical down the field threat. So that X receiver, you know, I think that's something, you know, although Matthew Golden, I feel, could play that position as well. He's not going to be there at 35, though. So you look at that. And then you look at just, you know, they're going to be looking at a guy that could double as a returner. And I think that's where some of these other cats, you know, Restrepo, you know, DeJounte Wester, obviously Jimmy Horn Jr. too. I forgot to mention him. Like, he was very crisp in his routes. He was fast. He caught the ball well. So that's another one.
Teron Davenport is with us. Teron, I want to get you to go in a little depth into the Abdul Carter health things. What was the consensus up there? What's your opinion of the health concerns? Is that red flag, or is that just, hey, this is a short-term thing, he should be fine?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, anytime you have an athlete that has a foot injury, I mean, there's no sport that you're not playing on your feet. So it's very important to look at that. But I think when you look at the fracture, the fact that it doesn't require surgery, that's a positive. It's something that could mend together. Honestly, if I'm Abdul Carter, I don't take part in any pro day or anything like that. I don't think he needs to do that. And I think, you know, what he could do is already on film. Like, you know what you're getting with him. But then in addition to that, I really think they have to find out, okay, when did this fracture happen? Is that something that he played with throughout the year, or is it something that happened, you know, during training, or at what point? And I think when you look at Exos, I said this on Thursday, I think when you look at the guys at Exos where he's working out in Plano, Texas, Brent Callaway is the lead trainer. He is among the best in the nation, right? You know, he trained Matthew Golden, and we saw what he did. And there's a bunch of other top-level performers that he trained. But I say all that to say, I believe just going to see that facility, I'm very surprised that they didn't find that. But I believe if it was something that happened at the time during training, I believe they would have discovered that it happened then. And then on top of that, he's very close with Zach Woodfin, who was, you know, in charge of the strength and conditioning department for the Titans. So they're like best friends that communicate often. So that's going to be a lot of information exchange between the two.
The Rams were able to make a deal to keep Matthew Stafford. What do you think that does to the leverage that the Titans have with the first pick? Do you think it helps that, coupled with the fact that Carr is staying with the Saints, that there's more teams that started out this offseason saying, we got to go find a quarterback. Maybe we could get Stafford. Maybe we could get Carr. Those guys are off the board. So what does that do to the first pick?
I think that really makes the pick even more valuable because when you look at Matthew Stafford, he's a guy that they wanted to, the Giants, that is, they wanted to get. And so when you're able to, you know, increase that as an option, obviously, you know, that's something that is going to be more attractive, right? So, you know, you got that, you made that happen. And then now when you look at, you know, what's available, an option is gone, guess what? That increases the value. So 100%, you know, the Giants, they were all in on Matthew Stafford. Now it's Aaron Rodgers, or trade up to one or possibly both.
Right. And so that's what I'm getting. I think that is only good news for the Titans as we move forward here. And I want to sort of piggyback off of that with what you said about Ward. It's interesting to me because we've seen it in years past where momentum starts happening as teams see a guy more, the stock starts rising. If that happens, that also seems to be something that plays into the Titans' favor, whether they like Ward so much that they think he's the guy, or that somebody likes him so much that they're willing to really go in and give the Titans big assets to trade for that pick.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gives them assets to, you know, reason to want to trade up, and that'll help them build the roster. But you have to look at, if they feel that Cam is the guy, they need to go ahead and get him. And like I said, unless it's a huge deal that blows them away.
Now, TD, what is the latest on Harold Landry? I know that the team has given his team permission to seek a trade. What is the latest in regards to that? Has there been any movement on it?
Yeah, I mean, there was a rumor that Landry was involved in the trade possible for the Giants. I didn't hear anything along those lines. I'm not sure where that came from. But I will say it looks like he's definitely not going to be back, whether it's trade or release. Obviously, if they could trade him, a team's it's going to be some contract stuff involved, but they're looking to save money. They feel that he isn't, at the level of pay that he's going to be getting anymore. And it's something that is just kind of gradually happening.
Teron, you mentioned how enamored the Titans seem to be with Cam Ward. I would love for your impressions of Cam Ward listening to him speak last week at the NFL Combine. What sticks out to you as you listen to Cam Ward talk?
Well, I love his passion for football. And I think, the quiet confidence that he has is it's cool to see. And, it's the degree of almost arrogance, right? He was asked about holding the football too long. And he said, well, if I have time in the pocket, why not wait for my guys to get open? And he was like, I think there needs to be a new term for the whole off-schedule thing. And he said that anybody who says that he holds the football long just doesn't watch tape. I asked him specifically, what game or couple plays would show you the Cam Ward experience? And he quickly, I went to Virginia Tech, but he quickly went to the Cal game, and we know that was a huge comeback game that he had, fourth quarter down by 2 scores. And that's what he did against Virginia Tech too. So I just love how quickly he could recall, say, look, man, this shows what I could do. This is how I feel. I'm going to lead guys because, I do it on multiple ways. I understand the work I put in. I understand, what it takes. And I love this game. And I think, those are the types of things that you want. You want a guy that's going to come in and help change the culture and just be able to look at those 10 other guys and be like, hey, look, man, we're going this way, and they're going to follow him.
Teron, it sounds like Cam Ward has separated himself from the pack among the draft-eligible quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders didn't participate at the Combine. A lot of other quarterbacks did. I'm wondering which quarterbacks who did participate on the Combine, or which quarterback specifically, moved up the most based on his performance last week.
Yeah, and let me be clear. Shedeur Sanders is still, the quarterback I like the most in this draft, but, I mean, he's number 2. I think, Cam Ward is the better of the 2 prospects, just not looking at individual teams or anything like that. Now, as far as guys that impressed me, I mean, look, Jackson Dart threw that football really well. Slants, the deep in-breaking routes, everything was on time. His deep passes were really good. I was really impressed with him, so that was pretty cool to see. And it was funny, at one point, Bo Hardegree, the QB coach, he, along with Shedeur, Cam Ward, and Jackson Dart, were all standing together with the Giants pass game coordinator. And you saw Cam and Bo Hardegree kind of walk off to the side. I thought that was pretty funny. But, hey, look, man, you had Jackson Dart in the mix with them, too.
TD, before we let you go, we have a texter, Ben, who wants me to ask you this question. Let's say Teron was forced to bet his house on who the Titans will draft in round 1. Please ask him what he would say, and then ask him as if he was being forced to bet my house, meaning Adam's house. Is the answer different?
Well, look, man, it's Cam Ward. Both sides. I don't support, making someone lose their house, so I'm going to go sense of urgency for both of us. And, yeah, it's Cam Ward to me.
Thank you. My wife and son also thank you very much. Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation's Titans reporter, joining us. Great stuff, as always, Teron. We'll talk next week.
All right, for sure. And, hey, in about an hour, I'll be touring the new Nissan Stadium, the structure. So we'll make sure that we have some pictures and things up on Twitter or X and IG.
Hey, tell me where my seat is.
Got it. More importantly, I need to tell you where that 85 is up on the wall.
Exactly. It needs to be somewhere up there.
Teron, great stuff, as always, my friend. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yep.
You can follow the updates from Nissan Stadium at @TDavenport_NFL on X. 615-737-1025. Titans love Cam Ward. That's interesting. That's really interesting. 615-737-1025. 1025. We'll get back into the Titans in just a moment. But before we do, the Nashville Predators started their sell-off over the weekend. We'll discuss that and what could come before Friday's NHL trade deadline. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, the game.
All right, let's talk some loan pronto with all of you that are out there and looking for cash to address a need, whether it's a big credit card bill, a car loan that you want to pay off, or maybe a home improvement project that you would like to get started as the weather gets a little bit warmer. Loan Pronto is the leader in quickly converting your home's equity into cold hard cash. You can take that bundle quick and then address that need that we're talking about here. They've got several easy options to let you access that cash from your home. There's no paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, and often no appraisal. It's a much more streamlined process than it used to be years and years ago, and Loan Pronto is at the forefront of making it convenient for you. The average homeowner has over $300,000 in equity, and that's your money. One client recently got over $100,000 out, paid off a credit card, paid off a car, and even a personal loan. And in the process, they cut their monthly expenses by $1,500. It's a great way to go. It's a great financial plan. Get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull. Just call Loan Pronto, 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com online. 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. The Nashville Predators went 0-for in New York, losing to the Islanders on Saturday, shut out by the Rangers yesterday. That is the Predators' 9th shutout loss this season, which leads the league. By the way, in the previous 2 seasons combined, the Predators were shut out 10 times. So this season has not been going well, as we know. The NHL trade deadline is Friday. Some big activity around the NHL over the weekend. But the Predators kicked it all off, really, by trading Gus Nyquist on Saturday to the Minnesota Wild. He was second time he's been traded to the Wild at the trade deadline in his career. Gus Nyquist traded to the Minnesota Wild on Saturday for a 2026 second-round draft pick. The Predators retain 50% of Nyquist's salary. And, Willie, I'll tell you, when I saw this trade was made official and that the Predators acquired a second-round pick, I was shocked. I was pleasantly surprised that the Predators were able to extract a second-round pick for Gus Nyquist, considering the season from hell he has been having for the Predators. His production has cratered. He has been nowhere near as important to the offense, I guess you could say, this season versus last season when he was on the top line with Philip Forsberg and Gus Nyquist. But to get a second-round pick for Gus Nyquist, considering the season he's had, I think is an impressive bit of work by Barry Trotz.
I agree. I did not think they could get a second-round pick, but we did say this last week. Gus Nyquist, despite having an offseason, even by his regular standards, not even making the standard of what he did last year. I think everybody knew that was truly a career year. He wasn't going to duplicate that. But his numbers, his counting stats have dropped off a cliff. But I think the scouts who are watching him know that he is a good fit and can help you in a lot of different ways. And who knows that? Well, Bill Guerin, because he's already seen Gus Nyquist play for the Wild. So he knows how he fits with that particular group of players, a lot of which were there when he last played for them. So I think they paid a little extra. But what I'm hoping is also that also means that the prices are good if you're a seller. And Barry Trotz has to consider that, I think, as he moves forward. But I think around the league, when people saw that it took a second rounder to get Gus Nyquist, I think the buyers are probably sitting there going, ooh, if it's a second rounder for Nyquist, then what is it for X? The person that GM might be looking at.
Well, Willie, how should they, and this is a question for you, Adam, as well, but how should the fan base look at this from this standpoint? Okay, now you're in a selling mode right now because of where the team is at, but you really haven't given the definitive answer on your head coach. So why change the team drastically? And there's a possibility that you may change your head coach, because to me, if you want to give the coach another opportunity, shouldn't you allow him? Because maybe it's just the first year in this system with underneath with Coach Bruno, that these guys are sort of they all of them are struggling. Majority of them are struggling. Is it just a one-off? Or do you believe that, this team needs to move these players because it could be even worse next season?
If I'm understanding your question, you're asking if by trading Gus Nyquist, are the Predators putting Andrew Brunette in a more difficult position to show that he is the right coach for this team because they're removing a veteran from the roster?
Exactly. Okay. And I know Nyquist wasn't having a great season, but when you start to move players that they're counting on, even though the season isn't going well, what does that say for the head coach if you want to see some type of development moving forward?
I think they're independent of each other, Willie. But I understand what Derek's point is, right? Like Gus Nyquist, he hasn't had a great season, but he's a veteran player. He's shown himself to be productive. And if you remove Gus Nyquist from the team and you put in a younger player, a far less experienced player, it might make it harder to win. Therefore, it won't reflect well on Andrew Brunette. But
yeah, it's a good point.
But the fact is that, as Willie and I said, that the Predators were able to get a second. Like I like my prediction when I saw Elliot Friedman tweet this out. I'll tell you what my honest prediction was that the Predators were going to get for Gus Nyquist: a conditional 5th round pick. That was my guess. I was like, maybe it turns into a 4th if the Wild get to the Western Conference Final or something like that. But when I saw it was a 2nd, I was like, wow, that impressed me, just because Gus Nyquist, his production, as Willie said, the counting stats, goals, assists, and points were just at an absolute low, considering what he did last season. So, one other thing to keep in mind here as well, by retaining salary on Gus Nyquist, the Predators have used their retention slots, all 3 of their retention slots. NHL teams are only allowed to retain salary on 3 players per season. Okay. So they're also retaining salary on Mattias Ekholm through the end of next season. And they're also retaining salary on Ryan Johansson. Now, Elliot Friedman did tell us last week that the grievance hearing that the Flyers had with Ryan Johansson was held last week. But I can't imagine there is going to be a resolution to that before Friday. So the Predators have used their 3 retention slots this season, which means if they make another trade, which I assume they will, they cannot retain salary on another deal because they've used all 3 of their spots.
And I think the two go hand in hand. The point you're making, Adam, I think they were able to get a 2nd round pick because they were able to retain salary.
Yes.
And there was a lot of reporting throughout the day on Saturday that they were trying to get a 3rd. I think both teams were trying to get a 3rd team involved to retain the salary. So and that would be in Nashville's interest, so that they didn't have to use that slot, so they could use it for somebody else. Now both Nyquist and Johansson will come off the books at the end of the season.
Correct.
So they'll have 2 of the 3 spots available in theory next season. But let's go back to Derek's point, because it's a good one. I think the coach knows this happens to baseball teams and basketball teams. When you're a seller, the coach is collateral damage. Now, what happened a couple years ago? John Hines turned chicken salad into what. After
it's the other way around.
It's chicken soup.
He turned chicken poop into chicken salad.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I meant to say. Reverse that.
Yes.
So you see him say,
yes.
They gave him lemons, right? Because they traded 4 veterans: Nino Niederreiter, Mikael Granlund,
Tanner Jeannot,
and Mattias Ekholm. Those are 4 essential parts to his puzzle. At least when the season started, they were stuck in the mud, but he made the most of it and did a tremendous job to get them through. Now let's contrast that with what we saw Saturday and Sunday. You did not see an inspired team there, and that's troublesome, right? I think you're going to get overmatched in some of the games, especially now without Roman Josi. He's now week to week, and they've got to be careful with him, right? They cannot put him in harm's way with where they are in the standings. And this is another part that also Andrew Brunette saying, well, thanks a lot. You're be careful with Roman Josi. Thanks. But this is the job of the head coach, and he's got to connect. They've got to play for him. It's one thing to lose, but when you come out and play in the first period like they did on Saturday, that's not a good sign. And yesterday wasn't a whole lot, or last night wasn't a whole lot better, right? You saw urgent teams who are below the playoff line that are trying to get into the playoffs. They play desperate. Those aren't great teams. Those are good, solid teams, but they were just way, way better than the Predators. And so that I think is the answer to your question, D. Mace. It's not whether they win or lose the games. How do they look? And are they starting to get more out of Luke Evangelista and Tommy Novak and guys or young players that might come up? That's what John Hines did very successfully. And it probably helped him get another job pretty quick, even after Barry Trotz chose to move on from him.
Bob is in Antioch on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Bob, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, guys. I actually want to follow up on Willie's previous point. I went up to New York this weekend with a group of about 50 Predator fans, and I saw both of the games. And I was going to ask you if you felt like they were just they looked exhausted. you mentioned they didn't look very inspired. Do you think it was a combination of both of those, or do you think that there is a little bit of problem with staying motivated through this stretch of the year, knowing that they're totally out of it? Because I've never seen them look that listless.
Thanks for the call, Bob. Willie, what do you think?
It's a fair point. First of all, let me commend the fans that came up there. I saw a few of those groups, and I love the loyalty. Your team that you're going to see is in 30th place, and you're spending some dimes to get up there and go to those places. That's a sign of a good fan base to me. And this is what it's about, right? Is you want to see your team give maximum effort. It goes back to PK Subban's point, right? I did not see that from this group. I was disappointed over the weekend. And on the road, like, we can look at the number. Their road record is brutal this year. They just cannot figure out winning formulas, and they're leaving their goalies hanging out in the wind, twisting. They're not giving them a chance to succeed. So that has to get better. I think you can tolerate getting blown out by a good team on a certain night where you just don't have the horses, especially with Yossi out of the mix now. But there's something better than what you saw over the last couple of days. So that's it. That's what I'm looking at if I'm Barry Trotz. And look, you hate to put it on the coach. I'm not. The coach has to do this, but you got veteran players, right? How many we've seen veteran players sometimes. Are they inspired to keep playing? You got some guys that aren't putting up any numbers at all right now. Steven Stamkos is in a brutal slump,
worst of his career
right now. Yeah, and so what's going through his mind? I want to see more from him. Like I would love to see a guy who's going to the Hall of Fame show me that in a really tough situation that he wants to be a part of the solution going forward here. And that goes for Marchessault, for Brady Shea, for all these guys. They've got to keep working. It's easy. It's the easy way out to just go through the motions, check out, and say, we'll get them next year. But that, to me, it starts now. The building back towards next year. That would be my point going forward.
A lot of Predators fans want to know what's next before Friday's trade deadline. On The Athletic, Chris Johnston and Pierre LeBrun had a story today looking at every team and their outlooks for the trade deadline. This is what they wrote about the Predators. Quote, "A brutally disappointing season has left Nashville in an awkward spot at this deadline. This is not a rebuild, at least not yet, so GM Barry Trotz isn't conducting a fire sale of veterans after already moving out rental Gus Nyquist. The Predators are listening on center Ryan O'Reilly, but need to get a promising young player back in return in order to be compelled to pull the trigger on a reliable veteran with term. Trotz is more than happy to keep him. It sounds like nothing has advanced beyond tire kicking on the former Conn Smythe Trophy winner as a result." So we will keep an eye on all of this. Gus Nyquist out the door for a second-round pick. Ryan O'Reilly.
Let's talk about what that means, right?
Okay,
let's. Here are the guys. To me, O'Reilly, Sissons, and McCarron are attractive pieces to winning teams trying to win. But you know what's interesting? All three of those guys are under contract for next year. And those are three guys that are busting their butt when their team's getting their butt kicked. Those guys are playing hard, right? They're still competing. So if I'm Barry Trotz, first of all, and if I'm a scout, I'm seeing that. That's what makes me want to give you a good asset to get Colton Sissons or a Michael McCarron or obviously a Ryan O'Reilly, right? We know what he's doing. And that's it. Ryan O'Reilly could easily just go through the motions, say, I'm winning. I've done my thing. I don't have, but he is still playing hard. His stock is up. So it's a good position to be in if you're Barry Trotz, because if I'm Barry Trotz, I'm saying these are guys I want to help me fix this thing for next year and not go into a rebuild, right? Those guys are they're part of the solution. But also they're attractive trade pieces. So to me, that's what you're looking for here. I would not be surprised at all if especially what they got with Nyquist, that they get something better than people realize. Like I would have thought a third-round pick for Nyquist was very realistic. I think I said that on the air. Second was a little more than I thought. But with McCarron's cheap price tag and some of the things he does, I think you could get in that neighborhood for him. And especially the way Sissons is playing right now, his stock is up, I think, a little bit.
615-737-1025. The NHL trade deadline is Friday. We will bring you all breaking news as it relates to the Predators and the NHL trade deadline right here on 1025, 1063 The Game. Coming up next, a couple of breaking news tidbits in the NFL. Also, we have some family business to conduct. We'll do that next. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063 The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to come up short. But I got a solution for you, because at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Stillman and Company coming up next. But before we get to Jared, a couple of breaking news tidbits from Adam Schefter. First, Hall of Fame coach and broadcaster Jimmy Johnson has announced his retirement from Fox Sports after 31 years with the network. So Jimmy Johnson retiring from, I was going to say the broadcast booth, but he was never in the broadcast booth, from the pregame show. Jimmy Johnson retiring after 31 years at Fox Sports.
Wow, 31 years.
31 years.
And he spent 30-some years coaching. So there you go.
He's old.
Then you think about it, when he left the Cowboys. When he left the Cowboys on top, right? He left on top. And then he went back to the back in there to the Dolphins. And that kind of went, not bad, but not great. I think everybody assumed that when he went to Fox originally, that it'd just be a matter of time. He'd be back in there coaching somebody. He just never did. He stayed at Fox.
The other big news, according to Adam Schefter, the Bengals have placed the $26.2 million franchise tag on T. Higgins. This marks the second straight year that the Bengals have used their franchise tag on Higgins. This picture, by the way, that Adam Schefter used in this tweet, Higgins looks pissed. And Derek, you said during the break that if you were T. Higgins, you'd be PO too.
Yeah, I would be peeved. Listen, y'all want to dictate how much money he can make, basically. Because to me, when you franchise tag the guy, he's basically, you have the leverage. Because if he doesn't sign the contract, he's not playing. And if he missed too many days, that season, that's not an occurred season. So, part of him probably want to sit out, but he knows that may not be advantageous for him. The NFLPA, they need to fight. This is one thing I think they need to fight for. You shouldn't be able to franchise tag a guy 2 years in a row, consecutive years. Frankly, twice you shouldn't be able to franchise tag it, especially a guy that was still working from a first contract. Okay, I can see you putting a franchise tag on him, as that rookie deal is expiring, just to try to work some things out. But if you can't work anything out, you shouldn't be able to then double down and put another franchise tag on that guy. Let him go test the market. This is basically so the team can get something for him. That's basically what it is. They're not intending on paying him the money that he would be worth. Let him go to free agency. One time and one time only can you franchise tag a guy. That should be what the NFLPA is fighting for next time. Because to me, it just keeps guys locked up in these one-year deals.
All right, before we go, we have some family business to tend to here.
Dun, 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 dun.
All right, Willie, we're going to put you on trial here for a minute, okay?
Sure.
All right, so Willie, what do we do every Friday at 1:45?
Take it to the bank.
We take it to the bank. Is that your people's court music?
Yeah, this is my people's court music.
Okay. So before you left to travel to New York with the Predators, you did a live read for F&M Bank, and you mentioned, I got to get my picks in before I leave. You said it. We have the tape if you need us to play it. We have the tape. You did not get your picks in before the end of the show. So it was decided. I presented it to David Janes. David Janes is the commissioner of Take It to the Bank, and David Janes ruled in my favor that because you did not submit your picks before the end of the show, you are docked the quarter point you did not deserve in the first place for your yellow and green Gatorade tank.
Willie, before you have a rebuttal to that, do we have Willie's actual words?
All right, let's talk F&M Bank. Later in the show, we will take it to the bank. Banking made easy on purpose. 1:45. I've got to get my picks in.
Cut it right there. Cut it right there.
Right there. There we go. What do you have to say for yourself right there, Willie?
I was on the plane.
No. Willie, you said it before yourself. You said it yourself before you left. Hey, I got to get my picks in before the show ends. You said that, not me.
Impossible. I got my picks in.
Well, yeah. At
what time,
2:30,
David?
at
What time?
2:30.
What time did you get the picks in?
I was prompted when I landed in New York. I was prompted by our fine commissioner saying, "Hey, I need your picks." And
Hey,
so
Willie.
I got them to him in a timely fashion, well before the games were played. And so I don't see a problem.
Hey, Willie, here's two questions for you. Here's two questions.
Well, no, hold on.
In the history of this contest where guys miss the picks, they're not there, and they get them in as long as you get them in before.
Nah.
But
Hold on.
You also said in that clip that I need to get my picks in. So you already knew that you needed to get your picks in.
You needed to do them.
You knew. So you could have, and again, you could have given it to me before you left.
That's
but you
true.
You choose not to. So again, I gotta play this one sound effect. And this is my final law. Law and order. I choose to dock the 0.25 points. The quarter of a point.
Come on.
Hey, Willie, when did you get to the airport? Yesterday? Last week?
It's right around the corner. It's right around the corner.
Exactly.
I got to the airport at about 11:40.
Okay. What time is our show over?
But I was in the air.
No.
When you
Do you got Wi-Fi, Willie? Willie, you got Wi-Fi?
I do.
Okay, that's enough said. Enough, because even at 20,000 feet, you can send a text nowadays, Willie.
Also, I do like to add, you did like one of my replies that I sent to you at noon, so you could have texted that in.
Willie,
I thought I had time. I was never given an edict by the commissioner that says you have to have these picks in or else you will be docked.
Hey, Willie, what's the name of your lawyer again? What's the name of your lawyer? Your attorney again? What's the name of your attorney again?
Jackie Childs from Seinfeld. That's my man.
He's a terrible lawyer.
Jackie Childs is terrible, Willie.
You think I should get a new guy?
Absolutely.
Howie Cheatham
Dewey Cheatham and Hal?
Yeah, Dewey Cheatham and Hal.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Oh, man.
Dewey Cheatham. But by the way, guys, I have a nice green Gatorade for you guys. We arrived at the team hotel in Boston, and sometimes, at a nice hotel, they'll get out some refreshments, some snacks to have in your room, and they had some Gatorade out for us last night. I grabbed a couple of the green ones.
Look at that yellow Gatorade you're holding up right now.
And
it looks delicious.
you know what I did? I polled the audience. We were waiting to get on the elevator. Of course, it's 1:00 at night. Everybody's tired. Team got beat. I was like, is this Gatorade green or yellow? What do you think the answers were?
Yellow.
1,000% Max said yellow.
Max was not part of the unofficial poll.
Okay. Who was a part of this call? He had
already gone up to his room.
Who was a part of this call?
Chris Mason, Hal Gill, a couple other members of our travel party. I found that the younger ones immediately went to yellow, and I had the argument that there is another green Gatorade. I was like, I know, but that doesn't mean that this isn't green.
Willie.
But there were people that it was mixed. It was mixed.
What did Chris and Hal say?
Said yellow. Hal said green right away.
Okay. Hal's on my list too.
Yeah,
Hal should know better than that.
Mace said yellow, but then when I told him, I said the word lime.
Mace is cooler. That's
not
why.
Aware.
Mace is cooler.
When I said lemon lime, the word lime is in there. I said lime is green. I was able to convince the group, unlike you guys.
But what is the first word?
Unreasonable.
Willie, what's the first word? What's the first word?
Said, okay, lemon lime.
Willie, what's the first word in that? Lemon.
50% lemon,
yellow.
50% lime.
See, Mace knew what he was saying. Mace is the cooler. I say Hal's not cool, but he's not as cool as Mace.
I knew I liked to see Mace better.
And the cool people say yellow, Willie.
This is green. Word lime. So
lemon is first.
It's very clearly yellow.
Yes, absolutely.
But I've been looking for a way to get you not to have that quarter point.
he's been devising
he literally
something
came
to
in
take
and
that
asked,
half a point back.
David, I presented
when
my
I
case.
move into a first place tie on the last day of the season, we're going to bring this back up. And I'm going to claim victory.
All right. Well, enjoy your yellow Gatorade up in Boston. The Predators are back in action tomorrow night against the Bruins. But that'll do it for us today. Stillman & Company coming up next.
Be loved, love on your people. Have a safe, blessed, and wonderful Monday. Peace.
All right. Talk to you tomorrow.